Welcome to ETH, News and Headlines from a Prophetic Perspective. Here at End Time Headlines, our mission is to inform our listeners of the times and seasons in which we are in. In Luke 21:28, we are told, when you begin to see all these things come to pass, lift up your heads. Your redemption is drawing near. And now, founder and pastor of End Time Headlines, Ricky Scaparo.
I want to talk about a particular subject and with the intent, what I'm about to talk about is not with the intent to bring fear mongering, but as a point of reference for prayer and intercession. Again, what I'm about to talk about for the next few moments is not for the purpose of fear mongering, but it's for the purpose and the intent, because I know we have a lot of intercessors and prayer warriors that come on here regularly every broadcast, and that are followers of our ministry. This is a point of reference that you guys really need to be praying about, all of us as a body of Christ. And I want to talk about the reality of a major power grid threat. Recently there was an article that came out, and it kind of just reiterated what we've already heard for the last several years. So I'm going to give you some excerpts from some articles that came out and was published. One of these goes back to 2016. This is from The Hill. This is the headline reading, "Why a Power Grid Attack is a Nightmare Scenario." And I'm going to read a little bit of this excerpt of this. Quote, "Stores are closed. Cell service is down. Internet's gone. Hospitals operating on generators, but rapidly running out of fuel. Garbage is rotting in the streets. Clean water is scarce as people boil water stored in bathtubs to stop the spread of bacteria. An escape? There is none, because planes cannot fly, trains cannot run, and gas stations cannot pump fuel. This is the, quote, nightmare scenario that lawmakers have been warning us about. The most damaging kind of attack, specialists say, would be carefully coordinated to strike multiple power stations. In the event if hackers were to knock out 100 strategically chosen generators, excuse me, guys, in the Northeast, for example, the damaged power grid would quickly overload, causing a cascade of secondary outages across multiple states. While some areas could recover quickly, others might be without power for weeks. Again, this is a hypothetical scenario, and this wasn't just generated by some blogger or somebody behind a keyboard. This was actually a hypothetical scenario by our government and by the powers that be. Lawmakers and government officials got a preview of what this could look like in 2003. I don't know if some of y'all remember this, but a blackout spread from the coastal northeast of the Midwest and Canada. Again, a blackout spread from the coastal northeast into the Midwest and Canada. Remember this? This was back in 2003. I remember this. Quote, "If you think of how crippled our region is when we lose power for just a couple of days, the implications of a deliberate widespread attack on the power grid for the East Coast would cause devastation." This was according to a Republican senator in Maine. Researchers have run the numbers on an East Coast blackout with sobering results. A prolonged outage across 15 states and Washington, D.C., according to the University of Cambridge and Insure Lloyds of London, would leave approximately 93 million people in darkness, cost the economy hundreds of millions of dollars, and cause a surge in fatalities at hospitals. Think about it, because they would be forced to run on generators, and you could only do that for so long. So it would absolutely cripple our infrastructure and America as we know it. The geopolitical fallout could be even worse. Here's another headline. This one's from Vox, Vox. On the 15th of March of this year, the U.S. government released a report describing a massive Russian hacking campaign to infiltrate America's critical infrastructure. Things like power plants, nuclear generators, and water facilities. The joint report from the FBI and Department of Homeland Security claimed, again, I'm only giving you a report so you could take it as you will. The joint report from the FBI and Department of Homeland Security claimed that Russian hackers gained access to computers across the targeted industries and collected sensitive data, including passwords, logins, and information about energy generation. While the report doesn't specify any identifiable sabotage, the intrusion could set up future attacks that do more than just record observations. Quote, the day after the report was released, Energy Secretary Rick Perry told lawmakers at an appropriations hearing that cyber attacks are, quote, literally happening hundreds of thousands of times a day. Think about that for a second. We just don't hear about it because they are intercepted. He went on to warn that the Department of Energy needs an, quote, Office of Cybersecurity and Emergency Response in order to be prepared for threats like this in the future. This report is a, quote, big deal. It's the first time the U.S. government has publicly blamed Russia's government for attacks on energy infrastructure, explicitly pinning the attack on the Kremlin, means that rather than targeting the hackers as individuals, the United States can now respond against Russia as a whole. Now, this is frightening in itself, guys, in the heels of everything else from the alleged involvement with elections, with Trump, with the volatile situation with Putin, with in the whole thing in Syria. Now we're pulling out of Syria. I mean, this didn't just conspire overnight. This has been ongoing, and it's just been more and more dominoes to the effect of this. Now, NextGov, again, this is NextGov. A report was released recently that the Pentagon researchers tested a, quote, worst case scenario attack on the U.S. power grid. According to at least one source, NextGov, over 100 people gathered off the tip of Long Island in the month of November, so this was last month, to role play or to generate a hypothetical scenario of a cyber attack that takes out the U.S. electrical grid for weeks on end. The team of grid operators spent days restoring power when a digital strike took out one of two operational utility stations. The other utility was also under attack. A month had passed since all power in the region was taken down. Again, this is a hypothetical. This was a drill that was taking place last month. A month had passed since all power in the region was taken down by a devastating cyber attack. It had been a grueling 6 days restoring power across two electrical utilities and to build a deemed critical national asset by the Secretary of Energy. According to this report, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency exercise took place from the 1st of November to November 7th. So it was a span of 6 days that this took place. This was a fictional, but was designed to mimic all the hurdles and uncertainties of a planned out real-world cyber attack that took out power across the nation for weeks on end, a scenario known as a, quote, black start. The exercise took place on Plum Island, and I don't want to get into the whole Plum Island and the weird experiments that go on there, and we could spend a whole hour on that segment alone. But nevertheless, this is where DARPA, DARPA researchers were able to segregate a portion of the island on its own electric grid. Quote, the Plum Island exercise is the fourth Black Start exercise led by DARPA's Rapid Attack Detection, Isolation, and Characterization Systems, or RADICS program, which WISE leads. The first two exercises were conducted in research labs. The third exercise took place on Plum Island, but on a smaller scale and without public observers. Now, let me bring you to this month. This was from the Washington Examiner. It came out this month. Quote, start preparing electric grid prime target of terrorist. Profound threat, says counsel. In a new report this month, warned that that the electric grid is the, quote, prime target of terrorists. Americans are being urged to prepare for up to 6 months without electricity, transportation, fuel, money, and health care. Quote, people no longer keep enough essentials within their homes, reducing their ability to sustain themselves during an extended, prolonged outage. We need to improve individual preparedness, said a published report given to President Donald Trump. Quote, there needs to be more individual accountability to preparedness, adds the report. Surviving a catastrophic power outage from the President's National Infrastructure Advisory Council and published by the Department of Homeland Security. So I need to emphasize this. This was published by the Department of Homeland Security, and this was given to the president himself. And they're urging the people of America, Americans, to be prepared. Prepare yourself in the event of up to 6 months without electricity, transportation, fuel, money, and health care. In the event of, again, America is now a, quote, prime target of terrorism, and the power grid is in the crosshairs. Quote, it looked at the potential of a power outage of up to 6 months and recommended Americans have enough supplies on hand for a minimum of 14 days. And that is a minimum amount of time. Because in reality, if this thing was to play out like they, as they roll this out in scenarios, it would go much longer than 14 days. We're talking about weeks, possibly months. And that's just a cyber attack against the power grid. There's three main threats to the power grid, if you want to call it that. And that is, number one, it's the cyber attack from terrorism. Number two, it would be a solar flare, and they've been warning about this for years. Even under President Obama, they warned about this, that a solar flare could strike our nation and plunge us back into the 1800s. Or again, an electromagnetic pulse bomb or an EMP that would be carried out by any one of many nations that hate America and that are not our allies. If it was to strike us, again, it was successful. Again, it would knock us back to the 1800s. So we're not talking about 14 days here. If the solar flare or the EMP was to hit us and was successful in crippling our infrastructure, we're talking about, guys, they said one nightmare scenario would put us out years and not months. But anyway, the report, a draft to be voted on this week by the council, is the second one in 1 month. This is the second one in a month to warn of a, quote, profound threat to the electric grid from terrorism and naturally occurring events like a solar storm or a flare. A prior governmental report also called for presidential action to protect the grid. The report warned of a threat to world order and an attack. Okay, so now before we close this broadcast, again, I want to emphasize something. This is not to generate fear mongering, because I know people's going to accuse, well, you're propagating fear mongering. No, guys, all the sources are there. You could see this on Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN. All these major mainstream media outlets have reported this over the last, 6 years, 10 years. Again, they're emphasizing, one season it was the threat on solar flares on our power grid, and then it was the EMPs, and now there's credible threats, at least 2 in 1 month, warning of a, quote, profound threat in the form of a cyber attack. And again, according to reports, Russia allegedly hacked the U.S. electric grid. Okay? So this is some real alarming stuff, and it's not to scare you, it's to prepare you. Number one, to pray, to intercede, and that's what we do in the Spirit. That's what we do to prepare ourselves. The word of the Lord tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. So we're to prepare ourselves spiritually as a whole and be strengthened in our faith, in our prayers, and intercede and ask the Lord to thwart any attack, to expose these attacks. But what about in the natural? What can we do? And I'm going to bring that up in just a second as well. I'm going to show you something that we can do in the natural that's just common sense. But before we do that, when I was putting this together, I remember 5 years ago, it was April 21st, 2013. I journal all this. I keep this documented. But I remember I woke up, and I remember this, and some of y'all remember this, who are followers of our ministry, that's been following us since the beginning when we launched this ministry. I shared this, and some of y'all remember me sharing this. But on the wee hours of the 21st of April of 2013, I had an absolute terrifying dream in which I was outside in a city. I can't tell you where I was, so don't ask me. I don't know if it was New York. I don't know if it was West Coast, East Coast, Midwest. I don't know, but it was a major city, a major metropolis. And I was walking around in the city. There was all kinds of people. We were just walking around. The city was illuminated by the lights of the sky, the buildings, the high-rises, apartment buildings, the shopping centers. The city was well lit up from all the things that were going on. Then all of a sudden, I heard this loud, like this popping noise, this explosion, like don't ask me to try to replay that or try to generate that sound. I can't. But it was the best way I can describe it sounded like a transformer exploding. If you've ever heard a transformer blow during a thunderstorm or a windstorm, whatever, that's what it sounded like. But when this happened, immediately all the lights went out in the entire city. I'm talking, it went pitch black. It was so black. I'll never forget this dream as long as I live. It was so black that I could not even see. The only thing I could compare this to is when I lived in Tennessee, we went to a cave down there in Tennessee. Sweetwater, Tennessee, there's a cave down there. There's a cave system that you could visit. There's one in Kentucky too. It's Mammoth Cave. And you go down, you go down in this cave, and you already know, any of you guys that's ever been into a cave, there is no natural light coming into it. So it's completely dark. All the fish in the water are completely blind because their eyes have adapted to the total darkness, and they've actually lost all the ability to be able to see like you and I and whatnot. So every animal that's down there will go completely blind because you're shut off from natural light. So I remember we were in this tour in Sweetwater, Tennessee. We were down there at this cave system, and we were walking through this cave system, and we got to this one point where we're all out there in the open, and they have these lights on in the cave that they run electricity through. So I remember the tour guide said, I want to turn off the lights and I want to show you what it's like down here. And guys, when she cut the light, I've never experienced such darkness in my life. It was so dark, you literally, because when you lay in bed at night and you turn off all your lights and you're laying there and you could close the curtain, you could black out everything, there's still going to be somewhat of a light there. I can't explain it. I don't know if it's the illumination of the moon or whatever it is. It's coming in somehow, penetrating through your window, through your wall. But there's still, your eyes will adjust and you can see your hand in front of your face. But when I was in this cave system, it was so black that you could not see. I mean, honestly, it gave me instant anxiety. And now I used to deal with anxiety attacks years ago, and the Lord gave me victory over that. But instantly, it almost set me into a full-blown anxiety attack because I could not see. And this is what it was like in this dream in 2013. Whatever that was, I don't know. I was not permitted to see what it was, but when that explosion, that pop, that crackle, that noise happened, and all the power went out, it was completely, utterly, total. And the book of Isaiah talks about gross darkness, and that's what I thought of when this happened. But then what came next is what was even more terrifying. I heard the sounds of panic and fear, and it filled the air as far as I could hear. To the north, the south, everywhere around me, there were just fears of panic and cries, unimaginable, guys, to describe. When I woke up from this dream, I was so moved that I could not go back to sleep. Now, I've had many dreams that's really shook, just shaking me to the core. But I was able to go back to sleep pretty quickly after that because I just prayed and got peace over it. But this took me a long time of praying. I mean, I was literally shaking when I woke up from this dream. Again, this was 5 years ago when I had this dream. Now, I pray to God that it was not prophetic and that this was just a dream. I do. I pray to God it was just a dream and it was not prophetic. But I'm going to tell you something. It was so real. I could feel the fear in the air. I could feel the brisk of the wind that was blowing. I had all my senses. It was a very disturbing dream, to say the least. So again, we need to be prepared through prayer and intercession over this. But let me talk about practical ways to prepare. Number one, I want to give you this. This is from commonsensehome.com. commonsensehome.com. They did a great job on this. So I'm going to give them the credit for this, bring this up. When the power grid fails, 10 things you need to do to prepare. Number one, let me give you this. Number one is you need to have some type of lighting source, preferably a flashlight. A crank-powered flashlight is great for kids and serve a double function as a flashlight and backup charger for emergencies. So we need to have some type of flashlight that we can have on hand. I'd say multiple flashlights, to be honest with you. Number two, batteries. Now, I know in our house, we have a whole drawer full of AA's and AAA's and D batteries, and we stock them. This is one of the things that we do. We have tons of batteries. Stock up on batteries. You can't have enough batteries. Number three, water. This is common sense. You should have a store of water. You should have a storage of water. You should have a lot. In fact, they go on and talk about that you should have at least a 55-gallon drinking portable water drum with a pump and a roller base for emergencies. Now, I know most of you's not going to have that, but if you can get, you can go to a Sam's or a Costco's or whatever it is by where you live, but stock up, when they have these sales, get these bottled waters or these jugs of water, distilled waters, whatever the case would be. It's always good, not just for a power grid attack, guys, or the power grid was to go out, but you should have these in the event that there's a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake or a disaster. Come on, all of my folks that live in seismic fault zones should have this in the event of earthquakes. All my folks in Tornado Alley and those places should have an event of a tornado. All my folks on the West Coast in the event of wildfires, and the list goes on. So there's these disasters that can take place that we need to be prepared for. Number 4, we need to have a backup generator. Some type of backup generator. What happens if the fridge goes out, the freezer goes out, food starts going bad quickly? So, you can save some money up, buy one of these generators, and they're good to have on hand. Now, I'll say this at the end of this, because I know for you guys that are watching this, I do want to emphasize something here. Number 5, off-grid cooking supplies. Again, off-grid cooking supplies. Don't rely on an electric stove, a gas stove. Come on, somebody, a microwave. What are you going to do when you don't have that? You're going to have to old school it. Okay? So you're going to have an off-grid cooking supply. Learn how to make a fire. There's a novel idea. And they put on here a garbage disposal. You'll need a lot of garbage bags. Consider at least 3 boxes. You might need to have a DIY emergency toilet. That's something I would have never thought about. You don't think about these things. But there's going to be sewage, there's going to be waste. The garbage truck, the company's not going to come. They're not going to pick it up. All that stuff's going to, the water system, the pumping system. What are you going to do about that? Number 7, food, non-perishable food. Things like rice and things like canned tuna fish and sardines and things that can go prolonged days and so on and so forth. Number 8, you're going to have some form of heating and cooling, blankets, a tent, whatever the case may be, to keep yourself warm or cool, vice versa, depending on what situation. And number 9, communications. Okay, communications. A crank power radio is always great to have. You can listen to emergency broadcasts. Because listen, guys, people think you think you're going to have your phone. It ain't going to happen. Okay, so you need to have probably a walkie-talkie with a 5 to 30 mile radius, a way radio. You can get that. It uses 4 AA batteries, a ham radio, multi-pack handheld radios. So the list goes on. And then last but not least, you'll want to have a first aid supply on hand. And now I'm going to put number 11 on here. They didn't add this on here, but I'm going to add number 11. You need to have some form of protection to protect you and your family. If you think for a minute that the power grid's going to go out and things are going to go south, if you think for a minute that everybody's going to live in a Brady Bunch neighborhood and everybody is going to see you struggling because you were stupid and didn't prepare yourself, and they just happen to have an abundance of food and they're just going to come by your house, knock on your door and say, hey, we noticed that you don't have enough supplies. We noticed that you were lacking a little bit, so we wanted to come in and bring you some extra supplies. Guys, that sounds great. And that sounds awesome, and we pray and hope that would be the case, but in a real life scenario, that's not the case. The real life case scenario is going to be those who did not prepare are going to become desperate, and when people become desperate, they do desperate things, and that means they'll even threaten your life and your family's life. And therefore, I'm going to put number 11 in this. You need to have some form of self-protection. I'm not going to say what, because I'm not stupid, and I know that little ears are listening. So that's between you and the Lord, and whatever you choose and whatever your decision is on how you're going to prepare yourself in the event of that. But it would be stupid and very foolish not to be prepared in that area. So I want to say this before we close, before I get off here on this, before we shut down this broadcast for what we're talking about today. Number 1, I know people is going to try to accuse us of trying to propagate some kind of fear mongering to sell something. Well, guess what? We don't have anything to sell. We don't sell products. We don't even sell CDs or DVDs. We don't sell paid subscriptions. We're not selling survival kits. We're not selling mass quantities of food and water and preparedness. So guess what? Wrong. I don't have anything to gain from this, guys. I'm only telling you what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what we're reporting on our main website, what is coming from credible sources. So we all need to be prepared. Okay? I know there's another guy out there that has a whole ministry in which they warn similar things that we do, but then 25 minutes of the program is designated to selling some type of survival kit. But that's not us. We're not sponsored by anybody. We're not selling anything today. This is just a warning, guys, to prepare spiritually and physically, and for our intercessors and our prayer warriors to don't let your guard down, but keep interceding, keep praying, and keep asking the Lord to manifest, expose, and reveal credible threats against our infrastructure and our power grid. Now, as far as a solar flare goes, that's out of our hands, guys. If God permits that, it was meant to be. Actually, if God permits any of this, it was meant to be. But I don't see us praying away a solar flare. If that happens, it was absolute. As far as an EMP or a cyber attack, that can be delayed. It can be thwarted by prayer and intercession. Come on, somebody. It can be prevented through that. We can intercede. We can pray. We can change things as the body of Christ when we begin to stand in the gap and make up the hedge and begin to pray and begin to intercede, okay? We can't pray away the tribulation. We can't pray away the Antichrist. We can't pray away the false prophet. We can't pray away the mark of the beast. Those things are inevitable. Those things are going to happen. They can either be delayed or they can be accelerated, I believe, by the actions of the church. And that's the same way with this, what we're talking about today. We can delay things. We can shut down things from everything. Listen, you would be shocked at the amount of attacks that could have happened but didn't happen because of Holy Ghost Spirit-filled believers that got on their knees and began to travail and weep and intercede and pray and begin to bind and loose, and those things never took place and were made manifest. They were exposed or they were shut down, before they were ever made manifest. In Jesus' name. So this is endtimeheadlines.org, endtimeheadlines.com. Again, I'm Ricky Scapel, the founder of End Time Headlines, and we wanted to give you the reality of a major power grid threat in America. And not just America, guys, but Britain and your nation as well. Don't think that you're out of the woods just because it's against America, but it's this, we're all susceptible to this. So again, if you'd like to subscribe to our main website, endtimeheadlines.org, endtimeheadlines.com, all that information is going to be there on YouTube. You're going to see that when you click on our main website. Go to our main website, you'll see that. They're on Facebook Live under Free Daily Digest. Just click on that link. You'll get all that information as well. If you like information on how to support or how to partner with our ministry, all that information is there on Facebook Live as well under Support the Ministry. There's a link there. Just click on that link. It'll take you to a page where all that information is given as well. You guys on YouTube, you'll see at the end of this broadcast more information on when it comes to on how to support this ministry as well. So we love you guys. God bless you. Listen, stay safe. Just take these things to heart. Do not take these things lightly. Don't ignore them. Be prepared. And I always say this. I'll never back up from this statement. I would rather be prepared for nothing than be unprepared for something. Let me say that again. I would rather any day of the week be prepared for something than be unprepared. Or let me say it again. I would rather be prepared for nothing than be unprepared for something. That's what I meant to say. I got a little tongue-tied there. So does that make sense to you guys? So anyway, God bless you guys. We're going to take off tomorrow. We're going to be back on here on Thursday, and I've got an interesting segment that I want to talk about that's going to be exciting. and it's science again is catching up with the Bible, and it's more evidence of that. We're going to talk about that on Thursday in our broadcast on there, and then we'll be back on here on Friday with an encouraging word to close out the week. So we love you guys. God bless you. Again, thank you for your prayers, and thank you for your support of End Time Headlines.
We hope that today's word was a source of blessing and encouragement to you and your family. End Time Headlines is a ministry that provides weekly teachings to equip believers and inform the discerning of the signs and seasons in which we are in. If you would like to help support this ministry with a gift of any amount, you can do so electronically by visiting our website at endtimeheadlines.org, where you can sow a one-time gift or set up monthly partnership. If you would like to give by check or money order, you can do so by writing to End Time Headlines, P.O. Box 2312, Clarksville, Indiana 47131. Thank you for your generous support and partnership to End Time Headlines.